Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, or OMG, a vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who has collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and the seasoned citizens who use Apple products. Let's see who's with us tonight.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm 77. I've been around the Mac since 1984. I spent 9 years with Apple user groups and then got a great opportunity to work at Apple for roughly another 9 years. And then I finished my career with 15 years with the university on the San Francisco Peninsula doing basically Apple support. So I've been around the Mac for a long time and retired 7 years ago and have been a happy member of the Tucson Macintosh user group. And I am currently using an M1 Mac Mini, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, 9th generation iPad, and lots of Apple services.
I'm Peter, and I'm from Bay Village, Ohio. I'm 72 1/3 and a longtime member of the Northeast Ohio Apple Club. I did work for a very long time as a foundryman and as a high school math and statistics teacher for a while after that, and now I'm retired. I've been a computer nerd since high school. I bought my first Apple product 20 years ago, a 4th generation iPod Classic, lured by the click wheel and massive, at that time, storage. Year by year, I've been moving deeper and deeper into the Apple ecosystem.
Good evening. I'm Gary Shirk. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm 87 years old, and I'm also a member of the Northeast Ohio Apple Users Group. My primary products are Apple products: iPhone 14 Pro Max, Apple Watch, and an M2 Mac Mini with 3 monitors to give me some decent real estate. Today, my goal is to make life simple and enjoyable. Marty?
Well, I don't know how your week has been with what's going on in the world and what's going on my desktop. It's been a pretty crazy week. I decided to take a lot of the files from the shows that we've done and other shows that I've done and get them off of my Mac M4 Mini. And I have just been burning it nonstop to get it onto a Synology server and to get it off of my primary device, just to clear up space. Not that I really needed to, but I just regular maintenance stuff that I do. So it's been a busy week, and I've spent a lot of it in front of a computer. And we have sort of a similar topic to talk about with that tonight. And this generated from some discussion that was going on in Chris's Mac user group about how often should you upgrade, or should you get on the upgrades right away. And we're talking about software and primarily operating system software tonight. But we'll talk a little bit about other, updating our software and what our process is for doing that. But Chris, do you want to give a little context for that, and then maybe talk about how you manage your upgrades? So we'll turn the microphone to you for a while as you give us the context of the discussion and then sort of how you resolve it.
Sure. Well, one of the transitions I had when I moved from Apple to actually working for the School of Education at Stanford, which was obviously in an enterprise role. I had been involved with end user support in the user groups, and I was still doing a lot of end user support, but it was for professors at a major university as well as staff and students. And, there's nothing like applying stuff in the real world. And after having, in my early Apple years, spent 3 years on the phones taking about 12,000 calls, it was really nice to work with people individually. And that individuality carried on. In other words, depending upon who the user was, and, for most of the faculty I supported, I knew them. We only had I think we had about 40 on the faculty then in the School of Ed then. And, about half of them were Mac users or maybe somewhere in that vicinity. And then we had a lot of staff, and then we had a lot of students. And, try to get a feel for how much of a power user, beginner, intermediate user, where was this person, and sort of what was appropriate for them, their ability to absorb change, particularly when, we ourselves in the support realm would tend to like give time. Okay, there's a big update coming from, say, iOS 17 to 18. You clear a morning and really look at that or read in advance. And now that I'm retired, I do a lot of that, but it's sort of random for myself, right? Because I'm the IT guy. I never read the manuals and stuff, right? And but when it comes to a user group, and I'm sorry Bob is not here because he's president of the Deuce on Mac user group, it's a different story. You need to sort of come out with one message for your users in terms of what's the best thing to do. And, it is going to vary by the users. But on the other hand, what I'm finding is sort of a trend is as I get older, I'm 77 now and a half, and I'm liking things to stay a little bit more simple. I'm thinking about upgrading my Mac to an M4 Mac Mini, but then I think, wow, do I want to go through the hassle of, moving everything over? Can I get by on my M1 for another year or two? So there's a certain degree of variability in this. But, in terms of, I get friends that call and say, should I upgrade? Should I do this? And it really depends on them and where they're at. Do they have enough time for it? I have an old friend who will consistently run updates and then call me up and say, oh, wait, what's this? And which I'm happy to help up to a certain level, but being retired, I'm sort of got a lot of my own interests at this point. But just to bring it back to in terms of my work at Stanford, I had a pretty good feel for the users, or if I didn't know them, I would ask, certain key things, and to make sure, like for one thing, never do an upgrade on a Friday if you're going out of town and presenting a paper at another university on Monday, right? That's never going to go well. Or, the other thing that my Windows colleagues always had to figure out was how to block Windows updates from happening in the middle of presentations. That was always a disaster waiting to happen. But I don't know. How does that sound so far?
Yeah, I
Marty?
mean, I was part of or I was drawn into the discussion because I'm part of your group's IO, and there's it was a discussion by someone who said, I really want to know, should I upgrade this or not at this point? And then there's another more curmudgeon-y character who kind of set me up, I think, by being curmudgeon-y. Is like, oh, you shouldn't do this because little Timmy will be up, referring to Tim Cook.
Yeah.
He's making us do all these kinds of stars and fireworks and stuff on the apps that I don't want. So don't upgrade. And I watched that play out a little bit. And then I put my 2 cents in. But that's what really, and then, we had a little bit of side discussion about it. You put something in that chat, I believe, and Bob put something in. And I thought, well, here's a topic in terms of upgrades. So talk, before we get to Gary and Peter, talk a little bit about what your process is for doing upgrading software.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the aspect of security updates. And I would, in fact, I always like doing things manually. I run all my installs manual. I don't do any auto upgrades on my own machines. But on the security updates, I'm fine with them being done. And, It would be nice if Apple could sort those out, because we certainly want all users to run these security updates as soon as they're available, right? Uh, but sometimes that brings into that upgrade package, it could be a bunch of new features. It could change some of the user interface that they're used to. And so depending on the situation, gosh, it's been 7 years. I'm actually starting to forget some of this stuff, but there were users I had at Stanford who I would literally go through it with them, right? And say, okay, here are the new things. Here's this. Here's this. Or if there's something that was going to say mess up their keynote or something that they're used to, and they had a big presentation coming up, even in a month, I'd say, okay, fine, let's wait until after your presentation. Because professors, as you know, Marty, being one, are busy people, and they, updating their computer may not be the first thing on their mind. But and again, I wish Bob was here to, because he weighed in very eloquently, I thought, this week on some of those subjects. That it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the users, and unfortunately, yes, we definitely want the security updates, but depending upon what something's going to do, like a great example is Apple Photos and what happened with that, and iOS 18, and a bunch of people just freaked out, and then a couple of YouTubers, or maybe it was Apple Insider or Mac Rumors, said, okay, here's what you do. You go down to the bottom, you customize it, you turn all the new stuff off, and it'll look exactly like the old app, that kind of thing. But it's like, I think our resistance to change grows as we get older. And I'm sort of looking at Gary at this point because he's got a decade on me. Maybe he can share more of his thoughts on that.
Gary?
Gary
how do you handle upgrades, and I'll let you comment on your decade advantage that you have on Chris.
Gary follows Marty and Peter. So maybe if Marty and Peter weren't around, I wouldn't be upgrading. And I'm leaving a little ahead of Peter with the public betas. So I'm home, not necessarily always alone, but I'm on the computer a lot during the day. So I always try to be using the most recent update. Except on this machine, though, when I had a problem, I don't think it was the software, because Marty said he hasn't had any issues with with using the developer beta. But I ended up having to reinstall the operating system, and it was a very difficult experience. So I'm only running the regular Mac
Public.
iOS, but I try to keep up to date with all the software updates.
Peter?
Peter?
Well, I do the updates. I don't know what to say. Pre 2020, when my daily livelihood depended on my laptop, either mine or my employer's or the computers I worked at the foundry or at school, I updated, but not right when something came out. I waited 2 to 3 weeks after each release, and I'd watch the news and listen to see if there was any disaster that was reported, and then if not, I would go ahead. I would check for critical software that I used, which has changed over time, to see if there were any notes on their websites or things like that. And that would be my presentation software and my backup software primarily. But I think releases have gotten better and better and better. And in recent years, I don't have any trouble updating when things come out. And today I might even jump on a beta briefly when a new feature is compelling, when I really want it. I did it a couple years ago with Universal Control and Handoff when they appeared, and I didn't get burned. And I did it a couple months ago with 18.2 when the AI features were introduced into Mac OS and iOS. So I'm okay with staying on the main train tracks for the most part. I do, particularly when I was a teacher and when I do stuff with presentations, and I do funky stuff with presentation software that's based on a whole lot of public domain stuff that everybody updates together, is freeze a version of the OS. I archive a version of the OS in every piece of code, that statistical analyses of mine depend on when I do a major project, and archive that, and I can rejuvenate that and run it now.
Mm.
Yeah,
Well, that's a touchstone, Peter. Yeah, because if you're doing real work, that can be a different story. Like I got burned on one of the Sonoma betas because my DxO photography software, or two of the three packages stopped working. And I sent them a note and said, "Hey, it's not working with the beta." And they wrote back and said, "We don't support beta software." So I wrote back and said, "We got about a month to fix it." And they did. They did on the release version, on the pre-release, the second to last version. It worked fine. So it's one thing on a work thing, and I think that's very important. The other is I wouldn't advocate developer betas for people unless it was on a test machine, a second machine. So it wasn't your phone. So goodness knows we don't want to crater our phones because that's how doctors and friends and everybody else get a hold of us. But I found the public betas on iOS have been pretty safe. But like Peter, I will usually wait a day or two, and I'll be watching Mac Rumors, especially because they usually pick up on stuff, or Reddit. They'll pick up on stuff pretty quickly if something's not kosher, and it could be a problem. But yeah, in terms of Mac OS, we have to be a little bit more careful because if we've got projects and real work going on there, and I know Peter and Gary, in fact, all four of us really do in one form or another. You don't want to be in a position where all of a sudden you can't keep working on that project or you can't use a particular piece of software, and and unfortunately, I mean, even on Reddit, like I try to post something and say, well, has anybody heard anything about DxO? And I may or may not get any answers, and so don't know how good an answer it is, but that in terms of ourselves, I think it's a little different story. But I would definitely play with the betas on the iPhone.
Chris, you're going to hate
particularly
what
when I got my iPhone 6.
You're going to hate what I have to say.
Yeah.
I've been playing with betas for a long time, and there were times they would come out and they would inform you, or someone would create a list of where the problems are in the software, or what softwares are not up to date or won't run on the latest version for whatever reason of the betas. And so I'd consult that and generally check down the list and not see anything that I was using. So I would forge ahead and do betas, and have had a developer account back when we had to pay for developer accounts. Although I'm not a developer, the idea of being able to get access to that beta software and some of the features that were coming out to play with was just exciting to me. Okay, so that's one thing. That's where I'm bad. The second thing is, and Chris mentioned this, maybe if you put it on one machine, that's fine. Don't make it your primary work machine. I put them on everything, and I have not been burned. I'll tell you, there is one software I used to use that caused me problems. It was Rapid Weaver. It is a piece of software that's used for web design. And I was heavily into Rapid Weaver, but Rapid Weaver was always like a month behind on what the latest beta was or what the latest release was. So if I upgraded, I would lose my ability to run stuff on RapidWeaver. And when I was doing a lot of web page development for associations and such, that's when I'd take one machine and leave it without the betas on it, with the last version, until I got a sense that RapidWeaver would run. Or generally what I meant was RapidWeaver came out with a new version of it, which then would run on that software, and I'd have to upgrade the version or sometimes even purchase the version, which made me a little cranky. I'm not into the RapidWeaver universe anymore. I'm using more on-based web services to create websites. And when I do have to create websites. So, that's not in my ecosystem at this point. But yeah, I think what really pulled me over to the dark side was doing vision profiles. And with the Vision OS headset, the only way you're going to get the latest stuff is to sit on the developer beta. And haven't had any problems with the developer betas on that. Put them on my iOS devices and also put them on my Mac OS. But again, I'm running new equipment, and I'm not trying to stress it with a lot of services. I just want to see what the new options are with it. I'm also one of those folks that, oh no, there's a new Photos app, oh my God, I have to learn something new or it's different. To me, that's the fun of it. That's, oh, cool. Now I get to play around with something different. Let's see what they did with this design. Whereas other people's reactions are, I can't handle this. I wish it would go back, to the way it was. Well, it's not going back to the way it was. Change is hard. And learning things can be fun. So, you might have your preferences. We all do, but learning new ways of doing stuff or new design can be fun. So, yeah, I violate all the rules that everybody tells you not to do, and I have not gotten burned on it yet. And I sit on plenty of groups with other people who are heavy users or regular users, people who are like swear by the don't put the beta on it. And they put the beta on it and something goes wrong. And half the time I think it's not the beta, but it's the combination of things they're trying to do that would stress any machine. And it's unique for the beta. It might screw up if they weren't on the beta. But then they have a tendency to focus the fact that what's unique here is I'm running the beta, so it must be the beta's problem. So they'll say, I'm having a problem with this. Anybody having a problem with it? I'm like, not me. So dumb luck.
Well, Marty,
maybe.
are they doing public betas on the Vision OS? I think they're all developer betas, aren't they?
They're all developer betas. Yeah, there is no public beta.
Yeah. So there is no public
folks
beta.
have
So
to
they
wait
think
around
you're all
for
developers.
so the developers will go 2.1, 2.11, 2.2, 2. All the way up, and then finally they just released. They did the release candidate of 2.3. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're wishing for, we probably won't see until we get to 3. And 3 will be probably sometime in the fall, is what the projection is. So, yeah,
Maybe WWDC.
Yeah, I do the show with Eric Bolden, and Eric used to run all the betas and then stopped running the developer betas because he started testing some software out for some folks around photography, which is what he's really interested in. And so he had to pull the betas off. And then
Because you can't double beta.
Well,
You can't double beta.
and
In other words,
he
you can't
also
run a beta OS, a beta app.
and he also wanted to let the developer. I mean, he wanted to make sure if anything went wrong, it wasn't because he was on a beta. To report to the developer. So he did that, and I thought that was very righteous of him. And then I forget what came. Oh, then the idea of being able to put your virtual screen up. It was like, okay, Marty knows it now is showing up on the developer beta. I'm going to switch back to the developer beta because that was a function that he really wanted out of the Vision Pro headset. So Yeah, I think I would say probably 80 to 90% of the folks who have a Vision Pro headset are running the developer beta.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's probably a
So,
big help to Apple too.
well, yeah, I think so. Um, they get enough of my money. Um, so, how do you use upgrades? Upgrade is a whole process, and I kind of want to go back to Peter to say, because Peter went into some interesting things in his notes, and so let's start with him because it made me think a little bit about what I wanted to say too. So, Peter.
Well, I think maybe it was clear that rollback is part of my strategy for if something goes wrong. I mean, if it's an app that I bought through the App Store, I always update, but I always do it manually. Particularly with apps that maybe I only use every once in a while. If I've updated it since the last time I used it, I want to know that. And if for some reason there's a problem, I can go into my backups and restore an old version of it. Uh, I respond to upgrades or notices from things I don't get through the App Store. In some cases, apps in the App Store will level up a version to something new, so you have to rebuy it or buy it at a discount. And I evaluate my usage. If I haven't used it enough, I don't upgrade, I don't rebuy it. And if I'm not sure, I don't upgrade it or rebuy it until the need comes up to make a substantial use of it. And any software that I subscribe to, I use a buy and cancel strategy. Uh, if I'm not sure it's something I want, I'll buy a month's worth, see how I use it. And if it seems like I'm going to use it a lot, maybe I'll buy a year, but I'll buy it and cancel it, knowing that if I don't use it enough, when that renewal time comes up, I'm not going to miss it. I'm going to have to affirmatively, purchase it again after having evaluated it. So that's my strategy for software.
Yeah, I'm showing some websites that all the links will be in the show notes for, but it's about how to update in this case, update your iPhone or iPad, but it's also how to update your Mac OS. These are all Apple support sites, and they'll be part of the show notes for the podcast as well as the video cast, so you can find these links yourself. But Apple does a good job on its support site and giving you directions, and then even giving you some graphics on how to update things and how to do software. There are a couple of other articles, and maybe we'll take a look at those later. But an important one, and Peter talked about canceling subscriptions from Apple. And I always have to go and search how to do that. And it's like, oh, okay, if I'm doing it on my phone, here's the directions for my phone. If I'm doing it on my Mac, we've got that window that's part of your Apple account, and it gives you current subscriptions that you can open up. And you can look at the dates of when you purchased them and when they're up for renewal. If they're set for automatic renewal, and you can make changes in that. And then a couple of other websites on should I update my iPhone to the latest version of iOS, and some suggestions in there by USwitch on reasons why you should do the upgrade. And they talk a little bit about iOS 18 in there. And then a final article by Information Systems and Technology. This is actually from Chapman University. And the importance of updating your Apple devices and fixing security vulnerabilities and such. And it has good pictures and diagrams for that. So again, all of these links will be part of the show notes that you can find on the either embedded in your podcast file or also on YouTube channel. What Peter wrote made me think a little bit about my process, and I have mine set up for automatic updates. Reason being is I'll forget to update, to do them manually.
Mhm.
So just yesterday, I opened up my iPhone and went in to see what I needed for updates, and I had 79 apps that needed to be updated. So I'm like, okay, we need to switch this to automatic, because otherwise I do that every once in a while. I press the button and it does it without my consent anyways. So I do it automatically. I do kind of periodically when things pop up or an app that I'm using or that I see, it's like, how much did I pay for this? Or I'm on a subscription, or I see it show up in a monthly subscription list, and I'm like, I'm not really using or a receipt, and I'm like, I'm not really using that. What is that anyways? And I go in and look at it, and then I go to the page that has all of my Apple subscriptions in it, and look to see where it is, when its renewal date is going to be. If it's on automatic renewal, I'll shut it off. Because even if you shut those things off, you get an email saying, guess what? This app is going to be dead in 2 days unless you renew. And it gives you a reminder to go evaluate it anyways. So, and make that decision anyways, whether you want to renew it. So I go through my app subscriptions often, probably at least once a month. And it's generally triggered by, why, this is a receipt for something. Why did I just pay for that? And am I using it? Gary, do you have any tips for us or any thoughts about it?
I thought Peter might have something.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. Is nice that when something's going to renew, like a yearly subscription, even monthly ones, that you'll get an email a day or two before it's going to renew saying this is going to renew in 3 days or something like that. I tend not to respond to those. And as you were talking, when you said, what is this app? I would say my general rule, if I have any question about what that app is, it's a no renew.
Well,
Yeah.
one nice update in 18.3 iOS is that we can now see subscriptions and purchases in the App Store. So we don't need to go through Apple ID and produce your Apple password, which may or may not be an easy thing to do. You can just go into the App Store, and as part of the category under your account, it shows subscriptions, which is really cool because I have people all the time that say, well, how much is that photography app? Say, oh, well, it's like $12 a year. It happened to be Halide or something. But, it's a much easier way to get to that now, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and I had the
Kudos to
hardest
Apple
time
for doing
figuring.
that.
I had the hardest time figuring out how to find out what I paid for something that I already
Right.
purchased, because that comes up a lot if you're demoing apps or if you're doing presentations on it. And I think it was like Control Click or something to. It was some hidden secret way of doing it. It's nice that at least on iOS, it's gotten easier to run. Gary, any ideas or thoughts
No,
from a user?
no, I did find though in reading those articles you put in the show notes, Marty, going to the Apple Store, maybe that's what Chris was talking about, and updating a couple apps I have. I don't have really. I have mostly subscription apps to newspapers and magazines. Um,
Yeah. So, anything else people want to add in about this?
The one other thing I might mention is that when I get a subscription retrigger or a version update, it always, if I have time, triggers me to do a comparison shopping, and that's not just comparison about what else could I buy, but a comparison to do the things I already have and use a lot, have they incorporated some of the features that I bought this for in the first place, which often turns out to be true, with regard to text expansion or a lot of things where I had an app that was my go-to. Now it's built into 3 or 4 different things that I use for other reasons and could also use.
Yeah. Chris, anything before we sign off?
Gosh. I think we pretty well covered it. Just remember those security updates.
Yeah.
Those seem to
Yeah.
be becoming increasingly important.
yeah.
Yeah. And, Apple will sometimes say, this is a essential security, and they use kind of words to say, do it now.
Yeah.
don't. So they are on to something, but they don't want to cause incredible panic in people. But they put together some solution to it, and they want you to deal with that now in terms of the upgrade.
Well, that's
Well,
another thing too. That
yeah.
nowadays Apple's got a lot of engineers, if you hadn't noticed, and so
Yeah.
like we were alluding to earlier, things are a lot stronger. Releases are a lot stronger when they come out, and so there is really less concern. And particularly with 18.3, they were pretty strong, I thought, in their language about let's go ahead and do this right away, folks.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Well, let's wrap for this episode. It's like Wednesday night when we record this. I get to see you guys every week. Bob's not with us this week. Hopefully, we'll be back next week. He's after doing some traveling, he came back and is at a TMUG board meeting tonight, so he couldn't join us for the discussion. But we'll see him again soon. But seeing the three of you on Wednesday nights and just having this conversation for 30, 40 minutes is great. And then a little bit of the talk we do before and after. But thanks for joining us and being part of the Old Mac Gang. Our next live episode will be Wednesday, February 12th, 9 p.m. through YouTube, where you can watch this crew at youtube.com/@Old Mac Gang. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the show live. Please share this with your friends and maybe with other Mac user groups that we've got this little show put together. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. And hopefully soon, I will have some Old Mac Gang stickers for you guys and whoever else wants one. Thanks to the group, Gary, Chris, Peter, and soon to be, I hope, Bob again. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. See you next time.